nah, everything else is fine. Everything else is cool. Putting your lips on a milk carton? Stop! Zo! Okay, I'm tired. Let's lock in. Come on. Let's go. Oh, I'm about to drink this. Go ahead and get a little energized with that. Some Orville Redenbacher. You can get it at your local grocery store. No? I tried. Orville Redenbacher. Oh no, I'm yelling. Orville Redenbacher. If you want to sponsor me, you can. I won't be mad at you. In fact, if you do, I can promise you and guarantee you 100% that your sales is going to go up 67%. Just email me. My email is in the description box below. Sup? So. I really am tired though. This sleepover shit.
This happened when I was around 12 or 13, and it's still one of the creepy.
Question: what is the cutoff age? Well, I guess it just depends on where your maturity at, where you're mature at. But it's like, what is the cutoff age typically for like sleepovers? But then you got like, no, I wouldn't say grown-up sleepovers, but that sounds a little sus. Oh, I guess. $15, $16 to cutoff time age for sleepovers. Because I think after that it's just weird. Unless you're trying to get into something. But I don't,
Things I've ever experienced. We all refuse to talk about it, even to this day. It all started when my friend Jake invited me and a couple of other friends, Mark and Chris, over for a sleepover at his house.
Okay.
Jake lived in this older house on the edge of town. Nothing too weird or creepy. A nice modern home with 4 floors.
Damn.
Jake's mom worked nights, so it was usually just him, his little sister.
Well, I guess that's not 4 floors. Probably isn't that big. It's probably like a really nice home. It probably has a basement, first level, second level, and an attic. I would hope so. Because if it just has, like, at the base, 4 levels, like, I'm talking first level, second, third, fourth, and then there's an attic, and then there's a basement, Jesus.
And their dog Max in the house.
They got a dog. Dogs and pets, animals, they can sense shit. They can sense it's like all animals have Adidas blood in them. It's genetics. Goes back from generations. You have Adam and Eve. And then you got the dog. Adam and Eve didn't have no Adidas blood in them, but the dog, they had a dog. Maybe I need to go back to the Old Testament.
We were wild every time we had a sleepover because there were no parents around. That meant we could mess around as much as we wanted, stay up late, raid the fridge, and play dumb games.
Right.
We were in Jake's room, which wasn't huge, but had enough space for the 4 of us to lay out our sleeping bags on.
Question! I'm sorry. I just need to wake myself up. That's why I'm pausing so much. If you had a sleepover, what's the go-to food? I think for me it's Pizza Hut. I said Pizza Hut. Pizza. But I think my go-to would be Domino's. Even though they're expensive as hell. Domino's. Yeah. What's the go-to food if you ever had a sleepover?
Floor. We'd been joking around and watching YouTube videos for a while when Mark suddenly sat up and asked where his blanket was. At first, we laughed because Mark always lost stuff, like he misplaced his phone while holding it. But we realized his blanket was not anywhere in the room. It wasn't under his sleeping bag, It wasn't shoved in a corner, and it wasn't even in the closet. Everywhere we checked, it was not there. He was annoyed, but grabbed another blanket from Jake's closet, and we went back to watching YouTube videos. We went into the kitchen to make some pizza rolls, and came back about 20 minutes later, and when we did, Chris's blanket was gone.
What?
We all just stared at him. No one was laughing now.
Okay, how many people was it? I forgot their names. I know, I felt like it's 3 because there was already somebody in the house and he invited 2 people over. And I said, dog is in cahoots. How many bodies, how many living organisms are in this house? I think it's, including the dog, I think it's 4 altogether.
Jake turned the light on and we started looking around the room again. Once again, Chris's blanket was completely gone, just like Mark's. We all started to freak out a bit because everybody had gone upstairs to make the food, which wouldn't make any sense how the blanket was gone. We then noticed a torn corner of Mark's original blanket sticking out from under Jake's bed.
Oh, God!
So I went down to grab the blanket and I heard a loud rustling noise. What was that? Someone had screamed. When I was leaned down to look under the bed, I realized there was something under there. We played it off thinking that it was the dog because we had not seen him all night. As we were going back upstairs, that's when we noticed the muddy footprints near the window. The window was cracked open just slightly, enough to...
So whose fault is it that nobody checked the checklist? Hey, nobody checked the checklist. Hey, daddy didn't check the checklist. Hey, brother didn't check the checklist. Hey, nobody checked the checklist. Hey, nobody checked the checklist. Hey, nobody, hey, yo! Who fault? I feel like the person who organized the sleepover, the person who house is this, is their fault, and they should get clucked up to the max. Okay, not to the max. They shouldn't die, but I'm just saying. Okay, that's what I meant. I think that's what I mean. When I say clucked up to the max, like you dead, like you got beat to death, like your life is over. They should just get clucked up for not checking the checklist. It was probably intentional.
Like breezing, but there were faint, muddy footprints on the floor, leading from the window towards Jake's bed. We all could have sworn that the window was closed earlier. We decided to get out of Jake's room and sleep in the living room instead. We brought our sleeping bags with us and made sure to lock the door behind us. Max was sprawled out on the couch, and all of a sudden randomly started barking down the hallway into the pitch black.
Oh, God.
We didn't sleep much that night. We just sat there in a huddle, holding random weapons we had found around the house. Jake's mom came home the next morning, and we told her everything.
Weapons? Or like makeshift weapons? You know, excuse me. Like, there's a difference between having a big-ass sword randomly in a house or, like, having, like, like a tripod and using that as a weapon. You know? I don't know.
She believed everything right away, which was nice, but then she noticed the muddy footprints. When she did, she called the police. The cops couldn't find anything at first though. They said it was probably an animal or maybe a prank, which didn't really make us feel any better. But about a week later, Jake called me and explained that they had found someone in the attic. Apparently, when the police came back for a more thorough search, they found evidence that someone had been...
Mother cluckers. The first time the cops came, they should have did a thorough inspection. It's almost as if they did this shit. I had to make sure nobody was in here. I heard a noise. I don't know what that was. I know, I definitely checked the checklist. I don't know what the hell that was. But it's almost as if they did this, like the cops. Everything good here. What? The hell?
Living in Jake's house for months. The guy was hiding in
Shit. He been living in his house for months? The fact that nobody noticed since day one or that first week.
and sneaking down at night to steal food, clothes, and apparently blankets for over 4 months. I learned that the guy was what they call a frogger, which basically means somebody who secretly lives in other people's houses. The idea that he was under the bed while we were all sitting there is kind of insane to think about.
Thank God he didn't have no gun or nothing. Jesus Christ. That's crazy.
Alright, so this happened last summer, and I still can't believe how it went down. My friends and I had been planning this sleepover for weeks. It was at Josh's house, which was pretty much the...
Y'all been planning a sleepover for weeks? I don't know what sleepovers y'all talking about. What sleepovers y'all doing nowadays? When I had sleepovers, it did not take no planning for weeks. At most, a couple of days before the weekend. Or a day before the weekend. Hey, yo, what you doing? You want to come over and have a little sleepover? Not, why we taking 3 weeks to plan for? It's a sleepover. It's a sleepover. Ain't nothing to it.
That spot for stuff like this. His house was big, his parents were chill, and there was always plenty of food and space to play physical games. Josh was one of those kids who always had crazy ideas, but we trusted him. He was funny, confident, and usually the one who came up with plans for the group. He made things fun, and we all looked up to him in some way. There were 5 of us that night. Me, Josh, Ryan, Mike, and Ethan. We showed up at around 6 p.m. and just chilled. We did what most teens do, which was order a pizza, play video games, and watch horror movies until things got late. Around 10, Josh's cousin Alex showed up. I didn't think much of it because Alex would always swing by sometimes. He was a few years older, kind of sketchy, but Josh always said he was a good person. Alex hung out for maybe an hour, ate all of our food, and then just left.
Damn.
It was kind of annoying. Josh said something about how Alex was crashing at his place while his parents were out of town, but he wasn't staying the night with us. This made sense, so I didn't care to ask more questions. The rest of the night was pretty boring. We played some card games and eventually decided to sleep in the living room. Josh said his room upstairs was too small for all of us, plus the couch and floor space downstairs were more comfortable. We all set up our sleeping bags, left a few lights on, and fell asleep around midnight. I don't think any of us were completely knocked out though. We were all joking and half awake for a while, shouting explicit things and dirty jokes to make someone across the room laugh. At some point, I woke up to the sound of the sliding glass door in the kitchen opening. It wasn't loud, but it was just enough to snap me out of my half-sleep. I figured maybe Josh had gone to get a snack or something, but then I heard muffled voices. I couldn't make out what they were saying, so I looked over at Josh, and he was still sleeping in his sleeping bag. Before I could say anything, the living room lights flipped on. Standing there was someone wearing a ski mask and holding a gun.
Oh my God.
Fight and flight was triggered, and I froze. Behind him was another guy, also masked and carrying a duffel bag. They started shouting, telling us to sit up and stay quiet. We were told to empty our pockets, grab our wallets, and toss everything into the middle of the room.
Oh, and me, I think one of the powers that would really help out a lot in this situation is, y'all ever seen a movie? Some of y'all, I'm just gonna name it. Some of y'all probably, I know it's some of y'all probably have not seen this, but I think it's a Chinese. I think they're Chinese. But it was, I don't. All right, I'm just. The movie is called Kung Fu Hustle, right? Kung Fu Hustle. And there was a moment where there was like this old lady and a bunch of bad guys. And her power is she can scream really loud and burst people's eardrums. This scene, that'll be clutch.
I'd never been held at gunpoint, so I felt really nervous scrambling to do what he said. I couldn't stop staring at the gun in his hand. It wasn't some fake toy. It was real, and he was pointing it right at us. I couldn't understand that it was happening. Josh was trying to act just as scared as the rest of us, but something about the way he kept glancing at the armed robber felt off for some reason. It was like they were making eye contact, almost like they were communicating without saying anything. At first, I thought I was imagining it, but the more I watched, the more obvious it became. The robber kept screaming orders, telling us to grab our phones, watches, and anything valuable. He even made Mike dump out his backpack because he said it looked too full. The other guy with the robber started going through the kitchen drawers, grabbing random stuff like Josh's mom's jewelry box. It was chaos. He even started drinking the milk straight out of the carton.
Oh
This made me
no!
panic more because I wanted
Oh no! Yeah, see, now everything else is fine. Everything else is cool. Putting your lips on a milk carton? No. Now we got box. Put down the gun and run this fade. Throw up them hands. Come on. We got some business to take care of. No, that's diabolical. That's insane. I'm cool with everything else, but the moment you put your lips on a milk carton, come on. Now I gotta go for the ankles and the kneecaps and the elbows and chop it.
laugh, which is messed up. And then he fired the gun. It wasn't at any of us, thank God, but he shot it into the ceiling. The sound was deafening. Ryan started crying, and Ethan couldn't stop shaking. The robber told us to shut up, or the next shot wouldn't miss.
How are we gonna shut up when our life is on the line? What the hell are you talking about? This is literally our first time seeing a gun, and we're held at gunpoint. You're robbing us right now. Have a gun pointed at us. Talking about shut up. Just stop. Don't make no noise. Don't move.
I couldn't even think straight. The only thing I could do was hope that it would be over soon. After they grabbed everything, the robber and the other guy ran out the door, leaving us sitting there in shock. No one said anything for a while. Josh was the first one to speak, saying something like, "What just happened?" But the way he said it felt so fake, like he was trying too hard to act surprised. That's when Ethan noticed something. Josh's stuff wasn't touched. His phone was still sitting on the coffee table, his wallet was still in his bag, and even his expensive sneakers by the door were still there.
Now we gotta run the fade on Josh. Now we have to go to the ankles, to the kneecaps, to the elbows, and to the throat at Josh. Now Josh gotta run this fade. Cause he's in cahoots. Ain't no clucking away he not.
It didn't make any sense at the time. Ethan started putting it together out loud, saying how weird it was that Alex the cousin had shown up earlier that night and someone had come back to rob us. He kept saying that it didn't feel random. We all started to connect the dots and an argument broke out. So we wanted to go find his cousin, but then we were confronted by Josh. He flipped out and started yelling that we were crazy and that it wasn't Alex. None of us were buying it though. Josh was sweating like crazy. He kept saying we needed to call the cops, but Ethan pointed out that Josh didn't even try to stop the robbers, even though he supposedly knew him. It was obvious that Josh had set us up. We ended up calling our parents instead of the cops. None of us trusted Josh to be honest if we involved the police. When our parents got there, Josh was still trying to play the victim, saying we were being paranoid. None of us believed him anymore. Later, we found out that Alex did have a record for stuff like petty theft and breaking into lockers. It wasn't a surprise. Josh had sold us out, and for what? A few $100 worth of phones and wallets? I haven't talked to Josh since that night. None of us have.
Damn. Go ahead and take off his lips too while you at it. Rip his lips off.
This happened when I was a kid, about 30 years ago.
Damn.
I still think about it sometimes.
30 years ago? Why are we just not hearing about this?
I was around 12 or 13, and my friend Megan invited a few of us over for a sleepover. There were 4 of us. Megan's house wasn't anything special, just a normal suburban place, but it had this attic that we all thought was super cool. That's where we usually hung out when we were at her place. Usually at our sleepovers, we would just talk and hang out.
Hell no.
It was nice, and sometimes we would smoke up there because we were kids just trying to be kids.
You got it.
One time, Megan said she found her dad's digital camera in the attic earlier that day. It was one of those chunky cameras with a tiny screen on the back. We thought it was funny how it looked, and Megan said we should mess around with it and take some pictures. We started taking stupid pictures of each other, pretending to pose like models or acting like we were in a scary movie. The flash on the camera was so bright.
Acting like you in a scary movie? Huh. But you're in a horror story. Ho, 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 look at that.
So everything looked washed out, which made it funnier. We even went down to the basement for a few pictures because we thought it would look creepy. And the basement was dusty and looked kind of gross, so we didn't stay there for long. After a while, we went back into the living room to chill. Megan started scrolling through the pictures on the screen, and at first we were just laughing at how ridiculous we all looked. Then Megan suddenly stopped scrolling and stared at the camera. She showed it to us and said something like, "Who's that?" In one of the pictures, there was a man in the background. He was just standing there near the living room doorway, looking straight at the camera. None of us remembered seeing anyone when we took that picture. Megan wasn't good with stuff like this, so she kept lying to herself and tried to say it was probably a shadow or something.
What?
But it didn't look like a shadow. It looked like a man. He was tall, wearing dark clothes, and his face was pale. His expression wasn't angry or anything. It was blank, like he was just watching us. We started freaking out. Megan kept scrolling through the pictures, and it got worse. In the next photo, he was closer. He was in the kitchen doorway, just barely visible. The one after that was worse. He was in the middle of the room, a few feet behind us.
At what point are you just gonna just shut it off? Destroy the camera. Close it. Because every time you swipe, every time you get to a new picture, the mother closer get close. The mother clocker get closer and closer. It's like that scene in Pennywise, where like they was like I don't know where. They was like in some sort of room, and they was looking at a projector from like the camera or whatever, and it kept showing pictures of the same, right? Well, they kept saying we kept seeing the same picture, but like different shits. And then Pennywise came up, and he kept coming up and coming up and coming up.
None of us had seen him while we were taking the pictures, and the idea that he was just there the whole time made me think of all the possibilities that could have happened. The last picture was the one that made me start crying. It was a picture of me and Emily messing around on the floor, pretending to fight or something. The man was right behind me. His hand was almost on my shoulder. I couldn't stop staring at it. It wasn't blurry or distorted or anything you could explain away. It was clear. His face, his clothes, everything. We all saw it. Megan grabbed a broom and demanded we check the house. Emily wanted to wake up Megan's parents, but Megan said they'd think we were being dumb. We turned on every light and went through the house.
Her parents would think y'all are being dumb when there's literal pictures. All y'all are seeing the same shit. No one else should have been up there. How is she gonna say, nah, she's in cahoots.
Together, checking every room, closet, and even under the beds. Everything was locked and nothing looked out of place, but none of that made me feel better. Eventually, we woke up Megan's parents. Megan's mom looked freaked out when we told her, but her dad tried to stay calm. He said it was probably just a reflection or something on the camera lens. Megan's dad checked the house and even went out into the backyard with a flashlight, but he didn't find anything. While this was happening, I remember the rest of us sat in the living room, too scared to say much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that man's face, the same face in the photos. The next morning, Megan's parents said they were going to call the police. They told us to stay put while they explained everything. But when Megan grabbed the camera to show the pictures to her parents again, they were gone.
Oh no!
Every single one of them. The random pictures that were taken before that night were still on the camera, but all the ones we'd taken during the sleepover had disappeared. Everyone and their mom said it was just a glitch on the camera, as the tech back then wasn't that good, but I don't think he believed it. Megan's mom didn't say much after that, but she looked worried. None of us knew what to do. The man in those pictures was real. I know what I saw, and so did the others. After that night, none of us ever went back to Megan's house. We didn't really talk much about it either. I think we were all just trying to forget it ever happened. Megan acted like it didn't bother her, but I could tell it did. We all drifted apart after that, and I haven't spoken to her in years. Everyone didn't want to believe it happened, even the parents. But still to this day, I remember there was that man in those photos, and it was not a dream.
Yeah, Megan and her peoples were definitely in cahoots. Cluck that. I want to know if they still in the house.
Ben invited us over to his house one night. Ben wasn't really my friend. He was one of those kids who was always around, but never really part of the group. There were 6 of us that slept at his house that night. Why we all collectively chose to go to Ben's house is still beyond me to this day. He invited us over for a sleepover and said we'd watch horror movies all night. It sounded fun, so we all agreed to go. Ben's house was normal enough, kind of old but not creepy or anything. His parents were out of town for the entire weekend, and I still think it was a bit irresponsible to leave a bunch of kids in a house for an entire weekend, but they were kind of rich. They left us tons of snacks and said they'd be back on Monday. That was the first red flag. Honestly, like I said, who leaves a bunch of 13-year-olds alone all night? Ben had set up everything in the living room. He had a big couch, tons of blankets, and a stack of old horror DVDs. We watched some cheesy old slasher movie, throwing popcorn at the screen and making fun of the bad acting, and Ben started off not saying much at the start of the night. After the first movie, Ben started talking about how real horror wasn't what you saw in movies. He said that it was about the things people don't see and the stuff that happens when no one's paying attention. I looked at one of our other friends and he mouthed the words WTF.
How nobody paying attention? That's when the real shit happens? Like how everybody's just distracted by the movie. How nobody paying attention about what's going on around their surroundings. Oh, okay. You talking about like right now? Oh, okay.
No one said a word. And then Jake told him to shut up and put on another movie, and we all laughed it off. The second movie was darker, slower, and honestly kind of boring. Tyler and Sarah started whispering to each other, talking about school drama, while Emma scrolled on her phone. I noticed Ben wasn't watching the movie anymore. He was staring at all of us, one by one.
Oh,
and
no.
He was angry. I asked him what he was looking at, and he just smiled and said, "You'll see." By the time we got to the third movie...
Well, I'm out of here. Talking about I'm gonna see. You gonna see my address, bitch. I'm out of here. I'm out of here.
The vibe had completely shifted. This movie was about this creepy old house, and Ben kept making comments about how it reminded him of his own. He said weird stuff like how houses could keep secrets, and you should never go around looking for things you aren't ready to find. None of us really knew what to say, so we just continued to ignore him. Then, during one of the quieter parts of the movie, Ben stood up and said that he had something perfect to show us. He told us to pause the movie and follow him upstairs.
Okay.
I didn't want to go, but Jake and
I'm definitely the last one to go upstairs.
Tyler were already getting up, so I went along. Emma and Sarah looked nervous. Ben's room was so strange. The walls were covered in posters for old horror movies, but what really stood out were the shelves. They were full of these weird trinket type of glass jars and old books, and these creepy dolls that looked way too realistic. The dolls were not store-bought, he had told us. They were homemade, stitched together from scraps of fabric, with mismatched buttons for eyes. Some of them were missing arms or legs, as if they were torn off, and one had a weird red stain across its face. Sarah pulled me aside while Ben was showing everyone the dolls, and asked if I also thought Ben and everyone in his bloodline was just weird. I started laughing, because Sarah was always good at lightening the mood, but as we looked over, Ben seemed proud of it. He picked up one of the dolls and started explaining how he made them, saying how each one had a soul, and they were all his friends. We all kind of laughed nervously, but I think we all started to feel the same thing, and that was that we didn't want to be there anymore. Then Ben said he had something really special to show us, and I thought to myself, oh, it gets worse? We walked over to his closet, and he opened the door. Inside was a life-size doll sitting in a wooden chair. It had button eyes similar to the smaller ones, but its hair wasn't fabric.
Ain't no way.
Real.
Ain't no way.
Long, dark human hair sewn onto its head. The strangest part was that no one in Ben's family had that color hair. Its hands weren't fabric either. They were rubber gloves, stuffed with something heavy that made them look eerily lifelike. Tyler and Jake started backing up to the door to try to sneak off, and Emma and Sarah both whispered that we should leave. But Ben just stood there, smiling. He said the doll was different and that it was alive in a way the others aren't. He then added almost casually that it doesn't like strangers. That was it for me.
It doesn't like strangers, so why the hell did you bring us up here? You trying to set us up. You trying to cluck us up.
I turned and walked out, and the others followed. Ben didn't try to stop us, but as we all headed downstairs, he said something like, "You shouldn't leave too soon. It gets mad when people leave." We all kind of walked out of Ben's room awkwardly, trying not to look. He was still standing by the closet where the creepy life-size doll had been sitting. I couldn't tell if he was watching us or not. No one said a word as we walked downstairs. It was late, past midnight, and the only light came from the TV in the living room. Nobody said much as we settled back onto the couch and floor. It was so awkward. Jake was the first to finally say something. He said something about how weird Ben was being. Emma and Sarah nodded, both agreeing that the whole night had been uncomfortable. Nobody really laughed or made jokes like we usually would. It wasn't funny. We set up sleeping bags and blankets in the living room. The TV stayed on for some light, and one by one, everyone started drifting off. I couldn't fall asleep right away, though. My mind kept going back to the doll, the way it looked so lifelike with its button eyes and that real hair. Everything I'd known about Ben was wrong. An hour must have passed before I started to feel myself almost falling asleep. Ben still hadn't come downstairs. I figured he must have stayed in his room, which was fine by me. The less I saw of him tonight, the better. I don't know how long I was asleep before I wake up, but it couldn't have been too long. The TV was still on. At first, I didn't know what woke me up, but I just did for some reason. I sat up and glanced around the room. Everyone else was asleep. Then I saw it. Something in the corner of the room. It looked like a shadow at first, but as my eyes adjusted, I realized it wasn't just a shadow. It was Ben. He was standing there, perfectly still, wearing the doll suit.
God!
His hands filled with tan liquid hung limp at his sides, passing his knees.
Oh my.
He wasn't moving. He was just standing there, staring straight at me. I didn't know what to do. My glasses were sitting on the floor next to me, so I reached for them slowly, trying not to make any sudden movements. It was Ben standing in that suit, staring at me like he was waiting for me to wake up. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. I couldn't even breathe right. I just sat there, gripping my blanket, trying to convince myself that I was still dreaming. But I wasn't. The way the suit sagged around him was disgusting. He didn't move. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, staring for minutes. My mind was trying to understand how he even got into the suit. It had been so big and heavy when it was sitting in his closet. I didn't think it was possible for him to wear it, but somehow, here he was.
I really hope it wasn't another body in that suit and he took the body out and got into that suit.
I don't know how long I sat there staring back at him. Then, without a sound, he took one step forward. That's when I lost it. I scrambled to my feet, tripping over my sleeping bag, and practically fell onto Jake. He woke up, asking what was wrong, but by the time I turned back to the corner, Ben was gone. The suit was gone. I tried to explain what I'd seen, but Jake just shook his head and said I was seeing stuff. Tyler and Emma woke up too, asking what was going on, but I couldn't get the words out. I felt terrible. When morning finally came, Ben was acting like nothing had happened. He came downstairs in his regular clothes, eating cereal like it was just another day. I didn't say anything to him. None of us did. We all just packed up our stuff and left as soon as we could. On my way out, I glanced at Ben, and he looked at me and winked.
Next time you see him, it's on site.
Back when I was 11, I had a sleepover at my best friend Alyssa's house. She lived just down the street from me, and we went to school together and hung out all the time. So on this night in particular, I walked over to her house sometime in the afternoon like usual. The first part of the sleepover went normally. I don't recall if it was a weekend or just a summer night, but I know that we stayed up pretty late. Alyssa's bedroom was upstairs at the front part of the house. At probably like midnight, we were in Alyssa's room and we noticed something out the window. We could see the street in front of her house and had a pretty good view of it. There was this guy walking down the street, but then he turned around and walked back. He seemed to be almost
Every day when I'm walking down the street, and I say, hey, what I wanna
back and forth between the house past Alyssa's to the right and the one next door to the left. We watched him walking and were wondering what he was doing. None of us knew who he was or recognized him as a neighbor. This was something that was unusual for the street as well. Typically, there were not people walking down the street really late at night. After watching him pacing in the street for several minutes, I remember that he stopped and was kind of looking around. Then he looked up, and we were sure that he saw us. He seemed to almost make eye contact with us for a second, and Alyssa and I quickly ducked down. Obviously, we didn't want him to see us, whoever he was. We decided not to look out the window anymore after that. However, probably 2 or 3 minutes later, there was a knock at the front door of the house. We both feared that it was the man right away. Alyssa's parents had gone to bed already, so we were the only ones awake in the house. We ignored the first knock, but there was soon another one. You could not see who was at the front door from Alyssa's window because the front step had a small roof over it. So we decided to go downstairs and see who was there. After making it downstairs, it was very dark in the house, but we didn't turn on any lights. Soon we made it to the front area of the house and to a window. We both looked out and saw the same man from the street standing there. He looked very suspicious because he had a hood covering most of his head and I could barely see his face. And the weather was not bad or anything that would make that seem normal. As we were both looking at him, he suddenly started looking around and then locked eyes with us. It was just like before when he had somehow seen us. We both ducked away from the window at that moment. However, the man then charged for the window that we were at. He reached it and started pounding on the glass. Alyssa and I both ran upstairs and woke up her parents. By the time they got downstairs though, the man was gone. The police were called and they arrived a while later with the man still nowhere in sight. We were afraid that he would return, but he didn't. After that night, we thankfully never saw that man again. We talk about that night all the time still, wondering who he was and what he was doing.
Y'all know what it was. The hell? If I was to ever do a sleepover, obviously there'll be some conditions. And I think some of those conditions would be I would have to know everybody at the back of my hand if you're gonna stay at my house. Right? I'm ordering the food, I'm making the drinks. Everybody stay in sight. Yeah. If we need to, if the bathroom on the first level is occupied, you better cluck and hold it until they done. Don't go nowhere else. Just stay on the first level of this house. Yeah. And I'm the last one to go to sleep too. So, and first one to wake up. Club. Y'all just be having anybody over these sleepover house. Jesus. Stop doing that. Keep it cool, keep it classy, and I love you. Stay happy. My family.